All right, guys, welcome to another episode of Omni Athlete. If you guys are here, you believe, like we do, that sport is a vehicle for elevating global consciousness. But you know that elevating consciousness through sport only matters if it actually helps you achieve a better performance when you compete. So our goal every week with this show is to introduce you to the performance you're capable of and experience that's waiting for you as an athlete or coach by uncovering the techniques used by the world's highest achieving mind, body, and spirit competitors. So with that, guys, I want to welcome in today's guest, Sem Verbeek. Sem, how are you, man? Good to see you.
I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Yeah, we're stoked to have you on the show. So Sem, just to give everybody a little context and a little background, you played tennis at University of Pacific.
Correct.
And tell everybody a little bit about the story you've had through college to where you are right now in the beginning stages of what looks like a very promising professional career too.
Oh, well, thank you. So I started in 2012 in Stockton. I graduated last year in June 2016. And it was really after my senior year where I had a conversation with Coach Redondo that I knew I wanted to keep playing. And so the first few months after I graduated, we were kind of figuring out of how to do all the setup in the beginning, what tournaments to play, what coach to find, and all that. So I spent a summer in Miami with a coach doing kind of a preseason. And then Stockton had the amazing opportunity to host a challenger at the university. And Coach Redondo was very cool to give me a wild card for that into the main draw. So I was very grateful for that. And my partner and I did well in doubles, and that kind of jump-started my doubles ranking, which helped get into the professional tournaments that I played this year. And it's actually been exactly 12 months since my first professional trip a few weeks ago. So time flies, that's for sure.
So Sem, let's start here. Tell me about discipline as an athlete, both as a collegiate athlete and then what you're experiencing now as a professional athlete.
Yeah. I got introduced to that term again through Coach Redondo. Yeah. And I think it can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. I think to me, discipline means not only on court, but definitely also off court. I mean, it can entail going through mindful practice, not just going through a practice, but having a purpose behind every single drill, every single shot you do, visualizing, practicing your mental focus, but also eating right, drinking right, sleeping on time. Those are kind of the concrete discipline attributes. But what discipline means to us was a lot more, I think, a little deeper than what a lot of people understand, is that we go through a little bit more of the spiritual and the mindfulness of checking in with your body, how you feel, and playing with that. And even if you are frustrated during a match or during a practice, is being able to use that to your advantage and being disciplined with the feelings that you have.
So then when you're talking about checking in with your emotions and your feelings, what does that look like as you're competing, right? So when you're in the middle of a match, are you trying to use that self-talk as you're going through the match to kind of say, hey, well, I'm feeling, I just had a bad shot. I'm feeling upset. I'm feeling maybe a little bit more, cocky than I should be right now. What does that actual awareness and discipline look like?
Yeah. Well, as you may or may not know, a tennis match is kind of going through an emotional roller coaster.
I believe it, yeah.
There's definitely lows during a match, and every tennis player has experienced that for sure. But there's also a lot of times where you can check in with yourself and your mind and your body, whether it be in between points or during changeovers, right before a point, where you can say, okay, how do I feel? And kind of take it from a different perspective, zooming out and looking at the match as a whole and say, okay, I may be frustrated, things are not going my way, or I'm feeling really good. And then recognizing, okay, how did I get into this mindset? What has happened? And if you like where you are, then obviously keep going with that. And if you don't like where you are, practicing your routines that you have, your power phrases, and saying, okay, what are some thoughts and actions that can help me get back to the present moment, where I can just win the next point, and then the next point builds on the point after that. So a lot of that discipline and checking in is meant to bring you back to the present, because that's all you can have. What's in the past you've done, and you can't change it, and you don't know what the next 2 points hold for you. So
sure. So what would be an example of a power phrase?
For me, there's different power phrases that I can use, whether I'm feeling good or not. But for example, on my serve, I can say, if my serve is not going too well, I can say load and explode, or eyes up and explode up. They can all mean different things. A power phrase should definitely be something that connects with you, not only mentally, but also physically, where you can feel your next shot and say, okay, this is going to feel good. But also it definitely helps you narrow in your focus to one specific thing. And that helps me a lot. I'm a big analyzer during the match. I like to overthink things, unfortunately. That kind of simplifies things a lot for me, and say, okay, focus your mind on this, and then the rest will kind of flow from that.
So do you feel like as you're playing, when you use a power phrase, right? When you bring that into your game, do you feel like that helps guide some of the self-talk that you're going through and some of what's happening in terms of that conversation in your head? Because I can see, for a lot of athletes when we're competing, right, we are probably unconscious of what we're actually saying to ourselves, right? As we compete, we're not thinking about it. So do you use those power phrases to kind of guide that self-talk? And if so, can you give us, just some examples of what that might look like in a match or in practice?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, for me, a goal is during a match to kind of compete with a relaxed body and a relaxed mind, just so that you can get to that almost unconscious state where we call it zoning, where you don't even think about what you're doing. And an example for a power phrase for me would be on the ball, there's a specific brand that you can look at. And if I notice that I'm getting distracted and my eyes are not always on the court, but looking at people who are watching or the environment that we're playing in, I tell myself, okay, just notice the logo on the ball before you hit, or get your contact point right where you want it. See your contact point. And that it's easy to judge a shot during a match based on results of the shot. Even though it can feel really good, you might miss it by a few inches. And without that power phrase, it is easy to go, oh man, I missed, I'm losing another point. But with that power phrase, you can go, okay, how did that feel? Was I focused on the ball? And then it's easy to quote unquote judge yourself on that and say, okay, maybe I need to focus on the ball a little better, or keep this focus for the next point, and it'll start going.
How did you cultivate that feeling of being able to let go of the judgment there, so to speak, right? So as a high performance athlete, right, we are almost coached and trained constantly to be judging, right? Whether we know it or not, right? We're constantly in that process of looking at a shot, a lift, a run, a save, whatever it may be, as how did I do based on the outcome that I wanted, right? So what have you done? What are some practices that you've implemented to help cultivate that sense of I think what you're saying is detaching from the result itself and focusing more on what that process looks like?
Right. Well, this year I've had the amazing opportunity to still go back to Pacific in Stockton and meet Dr. Greg Warburton, who you've had on the show.
Yep.
And he has been incredible and instrumental helping me go through what I'm going through right now. And he talks a lot about going back to practicing self-honesty, being self-aware. And that does have definitely helped me during my practices of, okay, what is my purpose on this specific day? What am I working on? And being self-aware. So, I might not like the shot that I'm practicing right now, but those are actually the shots that you need to work on the most, just so you can get that during a match. So something specific that I would work on during a match is that if I know beforehand that it may not be the favorite drill that I'm doing, is saying, okay, how can I make this a fun challenge for myself without being worried about maybe losing the drill or missing a lot of shots. Maybe say, okay, hold that one specific focus, or tap some worries out or nervousness out that you have about the drill, and then going from there.
So let me ask you maybe a different question that comes to mind. Self-honesty, right? So one of the things that Greg talks about a lot is this notion of radical self-honesty, right? Mm-hmm. Being constantly, and you've already hit on this, and like the awareness you need to have as an athlete. I guess I have two questions. One, why do you think athletes and coaches aren't more aware of what self-honesty looks and feels like? So why is that something that isn't coached necessarily, or for an athlete isn't a natural kind of mode of operating? And then what happens when you do start to become very honest about where you are and what your state, your body, your mind, and your spirit feels like.
Yeah. Well, I can tell from experience that it can be uncomfortable, definitely. If you're radically honest with yourself, there may be some thoughts and feelings that you have, like, wow, okay, I didn't know I had these, and they may be very negative towards yourself, and that can be uncomfortable to uncover. So I think that's definitely a reason why it's not practiced more, because it's easy to make excuses. You know, it's easy to blame it on the day. It's easy to blame it on the opponent, your racket, whatever sport it may be. But one thing that it did for me, and it still does, it's definitely still a work in progress for me, is that it allows you to play with so much more freedom. Just because you're self-honest with yourself, you can. It's known well before you can work on a problem. It's recognizing that you have one.
Yeah.
And I don't think problem is necessarily a good word. Maybe it's a challenge is a better word. But it allows you to work with so much more freedom during your practices and matches, because you know exactly what it is that you're working on, rather than working around it. Your focus is exactly where it should be.
What role do you think language plays in being not just an Omni athlete, but accessing peak performance? What I heard you do in real time right there that was really cool is you took problem and changed it into challenge, right? So you literally changed the word right there and said, no, that's not really what the energy that I want for what I'm saying. So tell me more about the language that we use as athletes. Like, what's the impact of that, both in what we say in our head, right? And then also when we're talking with coaches or other players, what is the impact of that language and using language that maybe pulls us forward versus holding us back or holding us down?
Right. Well, for me, it's a big thing to go from don'ts to do's. When someone tells you don't think of a purple elephant, the first thing your mind is going to do is think of a purple elephant.
Totally. I already did.
Yeah, exactly. So if I change my vocabulary from don't miss that shot or don't miss or don't get nervous, I was saying, okay, accept what you're feeling. Yeah, you may have missed that shot, or you may be nervous. Do work with it, or do something that you know will help you and makes you play the play you want to play. Sorry.
No, it's all good.
Yeah, so that definitely helps when you're going through specifics of shots and say, okay, I don't want to miss this. You might want to say, okay, hit this right where you want it, or you know where your focus point is going to be. So if you go from specific don'ts to specific do's, it allows you to be a lot more comfortable with yourself, and it's also a better focus for me.
Yeah. So how does that play into authenticity as an athlete, right? So that freedom you talk about, you know, what it sounds like, you know, you're hitting on a little bit there, and I just, you know, feel free to riff on this if it makes sense. Like, authenticity as an athlete seems to be such a critical component, right? Can you be Sem Verbeek 100% of the time, whether you are on the court, in the classroom, just with friends, family, whatever the case may be? So what role does freedom play in finding that authenticity, and how important is that, if at all?
Yeah, for sure. I realized during my time at Pacific that for me, when watching other tennis players as well, it's very easy to find that a tennis match is kind of a microcosm of what's going on in people's lives.
Yeah.
It's really easy to see if someone gets frustrated easily. That's probably something that happens in school or with personal relations as well. And I've had that experience myself, almost laughable to a point. But I think that authenticity comes back to holding core values that you can experience through life, not only through a tennis match, but knowing what makes you you, and what you want to make you you, is that the core values that you hold, and that's different for everybody. But those core values, if those are the values that you want to represent you, then that is something that you have to work on, not only on a tennis match, but also outside of the court. And that goes a lot further than winning or losing, because throughout this year already, I've noticed the matches more, and I've remembered the matches more where I know I played the way that I wanted to play, and I know that's how I wanted to represent myself emotionally and spiritually, rather than the result of whether that tennis match. Well, some of my best matches that I've played are during losses. Sure. And obviously losing never feels good as an athlete. But that authenticity and freedom makes it a lot more easy to accept the result and build on the positives that you can bring from that match particularly.
So you're talking about, it sounds like a life philosophy, right? These core values as an athlete and as a person. So what role has sport, whether it be specifically tennis, whether it be your specific teammates or coaches that you've had, or just experiences, what role has being an athlete at this level had in creating those core values and then creating kind of that life philosophy that you approach all of life with?
Right. Well, let me start by saying that sport, and tennis in particular for me, has opened up venues and doors for me that I would never hold possible before that. So I'm extremely grateful for the life experiences that I've had. And through those doors and avenues that tennis has created for me, it allows you to have live experiences that opens up your world and expands your comfort zone as well. I think something that Omni athletes are definitely aware about is that your comfort zone needs to be expanded every single day if possible. So those core values come not only through wins and losses, but also through experience that you've had with tournament directors or other opponents, or people that are so generous to share their house with me during tournaments. It just gives you so much more perspective on what everybody goes through their life. And everybody has baggage, whether it be emotional, mental, and being able to accept that and go through that with other people has been eye-opening, and definitely something I'm eternally grateful for.
So what can you give us an example of, whether it be a specific meditation that you might use or have used, or whether it's a specific visualization technique, what have you used to kind of uncover some of that mental or emotional baggage that you personally have been carrying around, or that you've had to work through your career as an athlete?
Right. Well, like I said, I'm a big overanalyzer, and especially during the beginning of college, I would get very emotional during what you can call pressure situations, where the score seems a bit more important than during other times of the match. And some specific things that I've told myself is that my value, I hope, doesn't come from my wins and my losses.
Right.
And telling myself that has been huge, especially in the past few years. Especially now going as a professional, you are judged by the media, the outside, and people that aren't in sport by your win-loss record or by what round you finish in. And telling myself, okay, you are more than what the scoreboard tells you, has definitely helped me in saying, okay, be at peace with what you have, and if you gave it your all, whether it be mental or emotional, then it's the best you could do for that day. And keeping that in mind with some breathing exercises and specific visualizations of what I want to do during quote unquote pressure situations has definitely made me more comfortable with myself in those situations, and say, okay, this be it. And whether it be wins or losses, I'm going to build on this on the practice court.
Yeah. So what was it like? You had a coach at Pacific, in Ryan Redondo, who is really believes in the idea of coaching the entire person, right? And coaching the experience of athletics on a deeper level than just let's go out and hit some balls, or let's train just technique. Yeah. What was that like for you as a freshman walking into a program like that, where, depending on, and what was your background like, having come from some pretty elite academies, where what was that like going into an experience saying, wow, somebody's asking me to, whether it be jujitsu or work on meditation or visualization? What was that like for you?
Yeah. Like you said, I spent a few years at an academy in Florida where I think I had learned a lot of discipline just outside of the court, being able to make your room, do your homework on time, all those little things that can definitely help during practice and matches. But I would say during my freshman year, it was very confrontational for myself. I came from a place where it's just drilling, and it's drilled into your head that you have to have this work ethic. And so it wasn't necessarily the amount of work that changed for me, but it was the different type of work that he had exposed me to my freshman year that it's new. And obviously when something is new, you're not very good at it yet. And for athletes, it creates a little bit of confrontation when you're not good at something. Because we're taught to be good at something from a young age. But I mean, right, looking back, I have nothing but gratitude for doing that. But it just allows you to to be in touch with not only your tennis and your technique, but who you want to be as a person and what you represent. I think that last point that I brought up was big for me as well, is that your tennis is a very individual sport, but going through college, you do not only represent yourself, you represent your teammates, your athletic program, and ultimately the school, and maybe even your community. So keeping that in mind and opening my eyes to that was definitely like, wow, okay. The way I act and the way I handle myself in the classroom, on the court, does not only impact me, but it impacts him personally, as in Coach Redondo, but also my teammates and everybody that looks to, in my example, Pacific Men's Tennis.
There's a responsibility you're talking about right there as an athlete. That was that something, that awareness of, that you had to cultivate and learn? Like, did you come to maybe a better way to ask that too is, when you went from a pretty intense, what I will call, ultra disciplined competitive environment at the academy that you're at, to Pacific, was that level of responsibility and awareness new? Was that something that you had to really bring awareness to, and was different than you maybe had expected to have just coming in as a college athlete, right? Was there a different perception around what it meant to be a college athlete versus when you came to that realization of how much responsibility you have?
Right. Well, before I started playing tennis, I played football or soccer for a very long time. So I had experience with playing in a team. So the team aspect definitely wasn't necessarily that different. But representing your institution was definitely something that was new. Even though we went to tournaments with people from the academy, it wasn't necessarily that we were representing the academy at that time, more of ourselves. So that deeper responsibility that you talked about was definitely something that I had to learn and was confronted with, but not only by myself, but by my teammates as well. But it ultimately made it a lot more fun because you share in every single experience that you had, whether it be wins or losses. You win as a team and you lose as a team, but regardless, it brings you closer together. And it also off campus, it definitely made an impact, saying, okay, this community of people that connects with the tennis world definitely looks up to us, and we have a responsibility to be role models, mentally, emotionally, just holistically. That definitely is something he taught us.
Who do you represent now?
Well, myself ultimately. I have and my family name basically. So when people think Verbeek in the tennis world, they might think of me, but I think I definitely represent my family and hopefully someday my country. That would be a great honor to play for the Netherlands, but one step at a time.
So what would you say about self-identity as an athlete? How has your identity evolved? You've already talked about some of this, but let's kind of dive a little deeper here. How has your identity evolved from when you started at Pacific as a freshman to where you are today? And how has seeing the athletic experience and maybe a little bit of a bigger view, how has that affected your identity?
Yeah, I think it would definitely bring to my attention from my freshman years that the impact of the community and the athletic community at the school specifically, that realization of going through games ourselves, but going to watch other people's games, is knowing that everybody is interconnected and interrelated, whether it be through a spiritual energy that you bring out during a win, or connecting with people just because you came to watch a game. It can mean a lot of things. And realizing that, going through that experience for 4 years, it has shaped my identity in a way of knowing that everything you do and the words that you speak have an impact on other people. Whether you like that or not, it has to be something that I personally have to keep in mind, especially traveling so much, is that people that you meet may not come from similar backgrounds. They may have been brought up culturally different. And knowing that, going through that experience with teammates from different parts of the world, has shaped my identity in the sense of that I think I'm a lot more respectful to different views and different upbringings that I was 4 or 5 years ago. Hopefully not being disrespectful 4 or 5 years ago. Being a lot more curious and open to, okay, wow, my experience was so different to yours, and what has led to us being here in the same room or talking to you specifically now. There are so many experiences and decisions from both parties have to have been made for us to be in this particular moment ourselves. And that has definitely been eye-opening and just mind-boggling. So,
how do you stay curious the more that you do? How do you stay curious?
I think I've been curious. My dad and my mom talk about this a lot. That even from a young age, I wanted to try everything. And what definitely something that keeps me fresh and focused is learning new things, seeking out different venues of academically, spiritually, physically. I like being what we call at Pacific at my edge, knowing that you're not going overboard, you're not doing too much to the point where it exhausts you, but you go to your edge of your comfort zone where you're like, okay, I'm not sure if I should do this. And we had a very good analogy of Trevor Reagan, who has a website himself, of what he called a lizard brain, in the sense of your lizard brain can tell a lot about your fears. And using that lizard brain to kind of guide you is saying, okay, do I feel my quote unquote lizard brain in my mind right now? That means you're doing something good. So going through new experiences, going to new countries definitely keeps me curious, reading, listening to podcasts. But I'm definitely open to learning all new things. So definitely that's something that I like to do.
Does fear motivate you, energize you? Does it, the lizard brain is a really powerful idea, right? This notion that, that we're driven by instincts and innate reactions to things that are not necessarily right for right now, right? We're not, we don't live in a world where there's a saber-toothed tiger chasing us constantly, right? So, what do you do with fear? And as an athlete, bring that into how that can affect your state as an athlete, and then what you do to maintain state when you start feeling yourself leaning into that fear a little bit.
I try to use it as a compass as much as possible. I've definitely had experiences where it kind of paralyzes me, and I don't know what to do with it. But I think, especially with the help of Coach Redondo, going through those experiences and realizing that at the end of the day, it can make an impact, but like you said, it's not like a saber-toothed tiger going after you. So knowing that that fear is there for a reason, but it's there to make you grow. Keeping that in mind has definitely helped. But during matches specifically, I think what we've been taught specifically with discipline is that we have a solution to every single environment and every single stimulus that comes to us. It is definitely an answer and a solution to a lot of things. And it's always a work in progress too. But knowing that you have that fear is natural and everybody has it. I think realizing that it's not something that is unique to only us definitely has helped me during matches, saying, okay, you're scared. That means this is working for you, and you have the solution. Because I think there's a difference between fear and panic, where fear can definitely be a motivator and saying, okay, this is something new. I'm scared. I'm nervous. And working around that. And panicking is maybe more giving into that fear than you would like, and not thinking rationally anymore during those situations.
So I want to take a quick turn and jump into the heat of the moment in a match and walk down this path. You've been described as a very competitive, yet in an awesome way, disciplined, respectful, and humble competitor, right? And so, the question I have for you, Sem, is, number one, where does the fuel for competition come from for you? And number two, what role does love play in competing?
Oh, my. Let me answer the second question first. I think what Coach Redondo has brought to my attention a lot is that when someone gives you their best effort, for me, particularly on the other side of the net, it's a huge blessing. Because when I or my opponent gives their best, that means they have a level of respect for you that deserves their best level of attention. And I think that has definitely something to do with not only the love for self-improvement, but definitely the love of the game and respect for your opponent and the sport that you play yourself. So I think love has definitely had a very big impact. But the drive for competitiveness, I think going through sports at a young age has definitely helped with that. And the idea of mastering something is a huge motivator for me. And knowing that mastery is always a work in progress is something that keeps me curious, to answer your previous question too. You're never a finished piece of work, and that is so much fun to me because there's always something new that you can learn. But that competitiveness has to come from within, as all athletes know. And I think the innate drive to not only succeed results-wise, but knowing that you can overcome obstacles through sport. And sport has helped me a lot. Going through obstacles outside of the court for me specifically is definitely something that wants me to keep competing for sure.
Yeah. What role does spirituality play in sport?
What role does spirituality play? I think it plays a smaller role than it should play. I think it's definitely something that is on the brink of breaking through, and it can be a huge, powerful thing. We have had the blessing of Pete Carroll, the Seahawks coach, coming to our sport, and he's also a Pacific alum. So he came to talk at our school, and the way he teaches and the way he preaches at his practices and games is all with love, but also with discipline and competitiveness. And I think spirituality can play a huge role in a lot of challenges that athletes have that think are mental or physical or technique-wise. I think can be solved with a lot of energy transformations, definitely.
Do you have to be religious to be spiritual?
No. I am myself individually. I'm not necessarily religious, but I do definitely believe in things that we don't necessarily see with our eyes. I think there's an energy between and around people that can be that you can be drawn to or repelled by, and it definitely have an impact on your environment too. The people that you surround yourself with are, I think, people that express a similar aura or have a similar energy and a similar drive to you that can either foster or bring you back down. So I don't necessarily think you have to be religious. It can help. It definitely is something that people can use as a motivator and a source of love and discipline as well. But spirituality is universal, whereas religion can be a lot more individual.
Do you feel like the athletic experience, right? The experience of being a competitive athlete, whether it's in games or practices, do you find that brings you closer to a spiritual vibration, so to speak, or further away, or helps open up or close, or what role does that true moment of competition and almost that state of competition play in accessing what we might call a heightened spiritual state or a heightened state of consciousness?
Mm-hmm. For me personally, it brings me a lot closer. That question brings to mind a match that I played against a player from Stanford that was very competitive, but very beautiful in the same way. I experienced some sort of calm notion, almost like a calm in the chaos of the competition where I'm like, okay, whoa, a lot of things are going on, but everything seemed very effortless. And like I said, I don't necessarily think that religion has to play a role in that, but it is obviously something like, wow, there's more to this match than what we think there is. And that sense of calmness that I had was very almost scary. It was like, whoa, I feel like I'm just zoning, I'm glowing, and I'm just kind of floating around. And while there's this extremely competitive thing going on at the same time, and I think that's a beautiful thing of competitiveness. And that energy and that feeling that I had is definitely something I can still tap into, whether it be in business meetings or in calls with people that I've never had experience talking to before, or going through different matches. It is definitely a source of energy that is within my body now that I can hopefully still tap into and recognize and say, okay, you felt this way before, let it happen. Because I think that comes with thoughts that I had during that match as well, is saying, okay, you can't control the onset of the thought because that just kind of comes naturally, but you can control the intensity and the duration of it. And that can be very powerful on and off the court for me.
So another jump, but it's very much related to the human experience that you're talking about, right? The nature of understanding the deeper we get into our body, the deeper it typically gets us connected to our mind and our spirit, right? So so you had a chance to play, it sounds like, at the San Quentin Penitentiary. Right?
Oh, wow.
And, yeah, and I would love for you to share that story so that our audience can hear a little bit about both what the experience was like and what that showed you about just the human experience as it's related to both sport and just life.
Yeah. So we had the amazing opportunity with the Pacific men's tennis team to go through the St. Quentin rehabilitation program, where they have a court in their backyard. For people that don't know, I think it is it still a death sentence prison or no?
I'm not sure.
Okay, it's for sure a heavy penitentiary with a lot of guards, and we had to make sure that we had the right clothing on, and so people were a little on edge, as is understandable. But that is, again, that lizard brain that we talked about, that's going to be very helpful. So we had the very humbling and amazing experience of playing and teaching tennis to some of the inmates that were there, and I think the most human experience that I've had up until now was that experience, not only because what happens in there is the most real that happens. I think realizing that afterwards in the drive home, everybody was kind of quiet and thinking to themselves like, wow, do we realize where we just were? But the most human part of that experience for me was, even though we came from such radical backgrounds and from such radical life experiences, we shared one love, and that's the one love for tennis that we had. Their passion, to see their passion and excitement for people from all over the world to come together that one day was amazing to see. Not only because they were so interested in learning what we had to say, but also they were willing to share their stories of how they got to where they were. And it definitely opened my eyes to saying I had may have had some prejudice towards their stories, or some things that I thought were true before they even started their story. But I think that wall was kind of broken down by the stories that they shared, and saying, wow, okay, they may have done something by mistake and they regret it immediately, or they thought they didn't have a way out. So it was definitely an amazing experience, something I hope I can do again. But it's very humbling, very humbling. Those are the last four words of how humbling it was.
Yeah, no. How did it affect your outlook on competing as an athlete and just sport in general?
It put everything into perspective for me, because even especially as a freshman, and even still now, and like I said, I'm repeating that I'm a work in progress. You can make the littlest thing on the court seem like the biggest thing. You hit a double fault on an important point, you think the world is coming apart, and you think all these thoughts. At least me, I think all these thoughts of myself sometimes. And going through that experience at St. Quentin Prison was like, okay, wow. Look at the opportunity and the blessing that you have at this moment. You're able to work on yourself. You're able to work in your game. You're playing. They call it a game for a reason. It's not. It's not a matter of life and death or something. And going through that has definitely made me appreciate what I have on and off court a lot more. But also put things into perspective. What we think of as pressure is heightened by 10 times for what they think is pressure. So that has definitely helped me going through tough situations during matches or during seasons. It was like, okay, think back to what you have, and think of all the positives that you have in your life, and be grateful for that. And that restored a sense of calmness in my mind, and saying, okay, it's going to be all right.
How can we give more athletes, and I guess this is a two-part question. So for reflecting on your experience with Coach Redondo and just the different coaches that you've worked with, what can coaches do to help give athletes a greater context for where sport is in their life, right? That I think what you're saying is that sport is a part of, but maybe not all of our life as human beings, right? There's a piece that it fits into, right? So what can coaches do, number one? And number two, how can athletes give themselves an opportunity to leverage that knowledge into higher performance and greater performance?
Right. I think going back to your first part of your question is trying to connect with the person. Obviously, I've only really had experience at the college level of working with a coach for 4 years. And Coach Redondo, I can honestly say, has become like a second father to me. Just by the things that he's said and done for the team, for me personally. I think I'm eternally in debt to him, and definitely also eternally grateful for the role that he has played and continues to play in my life. I think that comes from the connection on a human level that we've had the blessing to establish. But knowing as coaches that not all the people that you have under your guidance respond the same to the stimuli that you provide with them. And one thing that Coach Redondo has done an amazing job of is gathering so much information and so many stimuli to almost where we can pick and choose what works for us. He has said things that have been repeated by the people that he's brought in, but sometimes a different voice can make a huge difference in saying the same thing. So I think knowing that for coaches can be a big thing, but also for coaches to know that they are never done learning either. I think, like I said, Coach Redondo has done a great job to the Pacific Men's Tennis program for that. But knowing that nobody is a finished product and nobody is set where they are. Everybody can still continue to grow. Their comfort zones can continue to expand. I think that can be definitely something that would work for both coaches and players. And then allowing players to use that for higher performances is being open to it. Athletes have a notorious prejudice of being stubborn. We're kind of set in our ways. We can be very biased towards certain feelings that we have. And we think of like I said, the littlest things can make a huge difference for us. And I think for my 4 years that I've had there, being able to open up to the experience that we've had, only also on a performance level, has enabled me to go through these experiences now where I'm competing at the professional level and realizing that these experiences are similar to what I've already had, and using all the tools that we now have in our toolbox and the solution that discipline provides for me personally, going through that and opening your eyes to different avenues. Sometimes hearing the same thing from a different person can make a big difference. So pursuing those different avenues, whether that be books, whether that be websites or magazines, that can definitely help you. There's so much untapped information and potential out there for athletes. And I think that's a responsibility for me as an individual athlete that I have to take upon myself, but maybe for team athletes, is that if you want to continue to grow, that is also a responsibility you have to take on, in the sense of, okay, you have to learn new things in order to go through those high performance activities. And there's avenues and there's ways you can make that happen for sure.
How do you deal with any isolation that you may feel now that you've moved past the college atmosphere and team, right? Where the players you're interacting with, your teammates, your coaches, are part of the same mental model, right? They're part of the same environment and culture. You know, you guys are all speaking the same language. You understand the power of the mental and spiritual and emotional components of sport. As you've transitioned to the pro career, have you found that that's still unusual amongst your peers? Are you do you find, if so, what do you deal with any of that? How do you deal with any of the isolation that may come from feeling like you're playing with this perspective and the rest of them are playing with a completely different perspective? How do you deal with that dynamic? How do you manage it?
Yeah, definitely. I definitely still think that it is still unusual, even though it shouldn't be. But no, I'm definitely not saying that my perspective or the perspective that we had at college is better than any of the rest of the people that are out there right now. You just have to find what works for you. And I think one way of dealing with that for me is not actively teaching that to people, but as soon as they have an interest, is being able to share what has worked for me. And it's funny because a lot of times people are saying, okay, tell me something I don't know. And then I'm trying to say, okay, it is something that you don't know yet, just because my understanding of what I'm trying to teach or trying to convey to people is maybe a little different than what they have because of the 4 years that I've had in college. But it's definitely not something that drives people away. But one thing that I'm still continuing to learn and to deal with is that tennis players or athletes in general, I can say that are easy to judge people on their actions. So some of the things that I do before my match or during my match may look really weird to people outside of the match. But knowing that people are going to judge me on how I look, on what I do, is definitely something that I'm conscious of, and I'm still learning to deal with that and saying, okay, I have to do what I have to do, whether that looks ridiculous to some people or not. It's easy to kind of fall back and saying, oh, I don't want to look weird, or I don't want other people to think of me in that way. So it can definitely create a little bit of a disturbance emotionally, and I'm still going through that. But knowing the reward that it gives me during a match and winning certain matches has definitely made it worth it to me. Going through these rituals that I have, and like I said, my understanding is definitely not better or than any other people, because I'm still learning from others as well. When I'm looking at matches and saying, "Wow, how does he do that?" I try to go up to players and say, "What did you think during that moment?" Or "What does this do for you?" And that brings us closer together as well.
How does sport elevate consciousness?
Wow. That is a good question. It's funny. It's almost paradoxical, because the highest performances that athletes have are almost done unconsciously. Like I said, that zoning feeling that hopefully every athlete has had the amazing experience of feeling is done when we don't really think. For me personally, it's when I'm almost detached from my body and I let things flow. And so it's funny to think of how it elevates consciousness, because it does require a present focus to have. So I think consciousness is the ultimate feeling of being in the present, and sport can definitely bring you back to, okay, I only have this in tennis, this one shot in front of me, this one ball, this one point. Maybe in American football, I only have this one snap. You don't know what is going after that. So I think sport can definitely bring you back to the present, and going outside of your sport can then say, okay, I only have this one email to write. I don't know what's going to happen after that. So I think bringing you back to the present is definitely a big thing that sport can do.
That's awesome. Okay, so before I ask my last question, where, if anywhere, can our audience find you online if they want to follow you or connect with you?
I'm on Instagram at Semver, Semver. I post a lot of my updates on that. I have an athlete Facebook page. It's just Sem Verbeek, I think official, but I think if you type in Sem Verbeek, you can definitely find me. And then those are the two avenues that I use online.
Awesome. Okay.
Update people and connect with people.
Cool. Okay. So our final question: what does being an Omni athlete mean to you?
Being an Omni athlete means always actively pursuing growth, whether that be spiritual, emotional, mental, physical, just holistic growth. It's definitely something that I try to keep in mind every day. It is my purpose behind every day. When I wake up, I think, okay, how am I going to grow today? Whether that be my technique that I'm working on, or different things that I'm learning. I'm learning Spanish right now. I just came from a Spanish-speaking country, so that was definitely very helpful for me. But it's knowing that life happens outside of your comfort zone, and trying to be comfortable being uncomfortable. Because learning new things, for me personally, can be very uncomfortable and very humbling. But that brings me back with my 2 feet on the ground and saying, okay, you're nowhere near where you could be. And then being an Omni athlete, knowing that growth is what is needed for performances, but also outside of the court with my values and my family and friends and everybody that I keep close. Definitely is something that I try to keep in mind.
It's incredible. Thank you, Sem. Guys, go online, follow and stay connected with Sem. He is not only can you feel in his words, does he have an awareness that most athletes won't ever have, and really we need to find ways to cultivate more of. He's found a way to channel that into performance that's truly allowing him to exceed at the professional ranks, and hopefully has a super long and exciting career ahead of him.
Thank you.
Sem, thanks for being on the show. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks.
As always, guys, if this content is adding value to your lives and specifically to your performance as an athlete or as a coach, please, please, please like and share our content so that we can grow this community. That's what we're after right now, is just growing this community and helping as many athletes and coaches as possible access the teachings on peak performance, mental and emotional self-management, spirituality, love, achieving what it feels like to be in the zone and in a flow state, and everything that it is to be an Omni athlete. We want to get this message out to as many people as possible, and we need your help to do it. So if it's adding value and it is truly helping you as an athlete or as a coach, please like and share this content. And until next time, guys, mind open, eyes wide, feel into it, play.